I'm Michael Krasny. I want to welcome you to another episode of Gray Matter with Michael Krasny, a weekly podcast of deep dive interviews with national and international authors, journalists, tech and business experts, artists, scientists, entertainers, and opinion shapers. And you can become a member of this podcast simply by going to graymatter.show, and that's gray with an E. We include your questions and comments, and we cover a wide range of intellectually engaging and timely, stimulating topics distinguished by high-level content and technical excellence. Our guest this episode is Chip Conley. Chip Conley is a major influencer since long before people were called major influencers or called themselves that. He's a graduate of Stanford University with a master's degree from the Stanford Business School. He's also a hotelier, one of the first boutique hoteliers in the United States. Known for his work as a head of hosts for Airbnb as well as a hospitality entrepreneur, he's a best-selling author of 7 books and founder of the Modern Elder Academy. Chip Conley has been a major innovator in the human potential movement and a pioneer in establishing connections between business and psychology. And he's also well known for his philanthropy and his 3 major TED Talks. And I'm pleased to welcome our guest, Chip Conley.
Michael, it's great to be with you again.
And great to be with you again. And boy, lots to talk about with you. And I thought I'd begin actually by talking with you about where you are in Baja. You're now kind of in Baja half the time and now in Santa Fe as well with this modern elder economy and sort of embracing elderhood, are you?
Yeah, as a society, we have really lost a sense of the midlife journey and what it means to be an elder in society. And when I joined Airbnb at age 52, they started calling me the modern elder. And I didn't like that at first because I thought they were making fun of my age. But then they said, Chip, a modern elder is someone who's as curious as they are wise. And when I heard that, I was like, wow, that's what I want to be when I grow up. And so after leaving my full-time role at Airbnb, being there for 4 years full-time, I moved into Baja. This is about 8 years ago, at the start of the Trump administration, the first one. And I decided to create the world's first midlife wisdom school, the Modern Elder Academy, also known as MEA, dedicated to helping people reimagine and repurpose themselves in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, and to become sort of like elders in training, to prepare for what it means to be an elder in a society that, generally speaking, doesn't like old people.
Yeah, we can certainly talk about the dislike of old people and the invisibility of old people, but there's also, when I think about curiosity and the importance of maintaining that, and when you talk about sort of your ideal of being an elder with that curiosity intact, I also think about the wisdom. And the wisdom is often associated with age, even though we think the second law of thermodynamics ensures that we will continue to be entropic the longer we live and things will continue to wind down. And you know what they say, old age is not for sissies. But you've had a lot of experiences which have enabled you to claim a good deal of wisdom. And I think of you as kind of a lay philosopher in some way, someone who's been seeking not only wisdom a lifetime in your adulthood, but also spiritual meaning. And I wonder what you think now about, you're from Orange, California originally. There's an apocalypse that's going on in Los Angeles. I mean, Los Angeles is burning and it's incinerated. What does Chip Conley think in the wake of that kind of disaster and horror?
Well, Michael, I'm a big fan of Bill McKibben, who believes that elders and youngers can come together to help address the climate crisis. And I think it's quite despicable that our president-to-be Trump is beating up on our good friend Gavin Newsom about California and its practices around forest management. At the end of the day, I think what we need to recognize is that one of the values of elders is that they actually can see the future, partly because they have seen the past. Our painful life lessons are the raw material for our future wisdom, and so being able to understand the gravity of the situation that is at hand today, it helps us to see a situation like what's happening in Los Angeles right now, and recognize that, yes, we should have seen this fall that we're going to make sure that there's enough water pressure in LA to deal with what could be the kind of condition we would normally see at late summer in a place like Los Angeles with very dry foliage. But because of almost no rainfall in the fall in LA, whereas the Bay Area had an immense amount of rainfall, it was more at risk when the Santa Ana winds come along. So it's
and the politicians were simply unprepared for it. I mean, I don't want to go on the attack of people like Newsom and so forth. Trump said he was paying too much attention to the smelt and, the water going in the ocean and everything. But putting the politics aside for a minute, you've been looking for ways to enhance our just human condition and everything. What do you do with the fact that, you have a whole house burned down and all those memories in it, and, suddenly you're out there with that terrible sense of loss and chaos?
I don't want to make light of anybody who loses anything, including all the memory. You don't lose your memories. You lose your memories if you have Alzheimer's or dementia. You lose the things in your life that actually triggered memories. But the reality is that, our life is a life of learning that the material dimension of our body and of our possessions are meant to slip through our fingers over the course of a lifetime. And what doesn't slip through our fingers is our relations and maybe our spiritual curiosity and our ability to feel and express emotions. And so in some ways, in some weird, strange way, you could see the fires of LA and people losing possessions and homes as being the kind of thing that we all have to deal with as we get later in life, when our body starts to disintegrate. When it comes to our body, we show wrinkles externally, but when it comes to trees, they show their age internally through rings, the rings of a tree that are very internal. But I actually think that some of our most beautiful signs of aging as humans are internal. They're the rings of our emotions and our spiritual curiosity and even our intellectual heft. Yes, our brain doesn't remember as well as it gets older, but it has more crystallized intelligence, which is the ability to synthesize things and connect the dots.
You say look at the outside of the car, not so much as looking at under the hood and what's inside the car, right?
Yeah, well, I say that we were each, you and me and everyone else, was issued a rental vehicle at birth. And that rental vehicle over the course of time has more dings and chipped paint. It doesn't look quite as good on the outside. And, sometimes it's sad to see someone 80 years old who is trying to still look like a 40-year-old. And they're more focused on their body from a short-term vanity perspective than a long-term maintenance perspective. But what really matters with your rental car over the course of a lifetime is, what does it feel like on the inside? Not what does it look like on the outside. And so, yes, each of us has a rental vehicle, and we, at death, give it back to Hertz Rent-A-Car. And along the way, it hurts. This body of ours.
I like those plays on words. Like you say, don't think of crisis, think of chrysalis. And
chrysalis, yes.
There's also a sense of seeking wisdom that doesn't necessarily work with age. It depends on the individual, obviously. I mean, when you say the past enables you to maybe see more into the future, I don't know if any of us can really see into the future. We realize how limited we are. And now you're battling third stage cancer, prostate cancer. I mean, And you said cancer is your teacher. Amplify that for us a bit. How's cancer teaching you, or what's it teaching you?
Well, I mean, there's lots of ways you can look at a cancer diagnosis. And I first found out about this 6 years ago, but it went from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3. And so I've had, a lot I've dealt with, in terms of my treatment journey, which has been painful. But rather than sort of seeing cancer as this foe that I need to kill, which, I do want my cancer to go away, I have tried to see it as a teacher, as if like I'm in cancer school. My job is to graduate. My job is to learn enough along the way and to maybe think of my cancer as not a curse, but as something that actually can teach me something. And so what have I learned along the way? I've learned, number one, that yes, I want to take care of this rental vehicle. There are a lot of things that I need to do in my life that will make the vehicle run longer, and better over time. Number two is that I don't have to be the hero. I can ask for help. And I've had to ask for help a lot, and that's not something I've normally been able to do very well. Number three is I don't have to do it all. The Modern Elder Academy MEA is a movement of 6,000 graduates from 60 countries globally and 58 regional chapters around the world. And I sort of have felt like, okay, well, I'm in charge of doing this like I did when I did Joie de Vivre, which was, okay, I'm in charge of everything. But I have a great team, and I've elevated my CMO to become CEO, because the truth is, when you have a stage 3 prostate cancer diagnosis, you better have a succession plan. So I think for me, the key has been able to ask myself, what am I learning along the way? And including what's most important in my life. And I have 2 young sons. As you know, I'm gay, and I have 2 biological sons who are 13 and 10, with a lesbian couple of friends of mine who live in Houston. And so, when I got the stage 3 diagnosis 2 years ago, I said, I want to spend more time with my boys. I want to see them go into their teen years. And one of the questions we need to ask ourselves, Michael, is 10 years from now, what will we regret if we don't learn it or do it now? And that's a question I asked myself. And I said, well, I would regret not spending more time with my boys as they are teenagers, and they're right on the precipice. And so that has been another lesson of cancer. So I'm ready to graduate from this damn school. It's been a bit grueling, but seeing it as a school and as a teacher has felt better than seeing it as, the enemy who I'm supposed to eradicate in a war kind of metaphor.
Well, I hope you graduate summa cum laude and with honors, and get a diploma and so forth. I'm remembering, though, we were both involved at one time in Esalen and human potential movement and all that. And I remember people like Bernie Siegel saying, if you have cancer, because of the mind-body unity, it has more to do with your mind. You have to get rid of all those grievances and all those things that you're carrying with you and everything. I think we were pretty much, I don't think I was back then. I was pretty skeptical, to be honest about it. But those ideas had a lot of weight and probably did a lot of damage, so that you blame a lot of things on your cancer that you shouldn't be blaming it. It's just,
blame it on yourself.
Yeah, exactly. That's where you shouldn't be blaming it. Attitude and all that is important in terms of keeping us healthy, and there's no question about that. But the idea that somehow the origin of a malignancy or cancer spreading has to do with what you're not doing or what you should be doing in terms of your personal life seems to me wrong-headed. And still,
my sense is that there are many factors, and some of them may be lifestyle, and some of them may be pure fate, and
some of them may be environmental. You mentioned Bill McKibben, who, by the way, we did an early podcast with. I'm not talking about climate change here, but I'm talking about the air we breathe and the water we drink, and who knows what else.
That's right. So I have not blamed myself, but I have asked myself from a lifestyle perspective, what can I do to improve this rental vehicle and maybe eradicate the cancer as a result of maybe drinking less alcohol or almost no alcohol at this point. And I'm very curious about Vivek Murthy, potentially suggesting we have cancer warnings on alcohol. I think it's interesting. I mean, it's wow. Who would have guessed that in our lifetime? But maybe we will look back 20 years from now, sort of similar to cigarettes, and say like, wow, yeah, that had a very toxic effect on the body. And
the data's there.
It's
there. It's pretty impressive data, in fact, from what I've seen. I'm wondering, though, about when you mentioned you're being gay, you talk about identity cleansing and so forth. How important is any identity? Being a gay man or being a gay woman or being, someone who identifies with some tribal group or whatever. When you talk about identity cleansing, for example, How far does one go with that? What does that mean?
Well, we're born as a human, we die as a human, and along the way, somehow we take up with tribes, and we wear these raincoats or uniforms that we call identities, and by the time we get into our 40s, 50s, and 60s, we have an awful lot of uniforms we're wearing. We are the son of parents taking care of them. We're the father of kids taking care of them. We are we have a spouse and we're providing for the family. We are a PTA leader. We are a marathon runner. We are a Stanford graduate. We are a political activist. And we have so many identities that define us, and tribes that we connect with, often in opposition to other tribes that have a different point of view. That you're wearing so many uniforms that you can't move. And so part of what we need to start doing in the middle of our life, let's call it midlife, or you can call it middlescence, the adult version of adolescence, is to start disrobing from these identities, from these uniforms, such that we get back to the essence of who we are as humans, because that is, at the end of the day, our most common unity comes from our humanity. So yeah, I would say that I've been disrobing. To be a gay man is not 40 years ago when I came out, 42 years ago when I came out, it was something I wore very proudly, and gay pride is a big deal in San Francisco and in many places around the world. But today it's, that's not a tribe that I necessarily want to exclusively hang out with. I find it boring. I don't want to be in a ghetto. I don't want to hang out with just one kind of people.
Identity politics has shown us how
Oh my
constricting
God.
it can be.
Identitarians, we have the identitarian nature. And so I think, it's like so much in life, and the pendulum swings in one direction and goes a little bit far, and then it comes back in the other direction and goes a little too far. Unfortunately, as a we've created a country that is based upon those polarities. And I think just as we are getting older, we're not just growing old, we're growing whole. And we are learning how to alchemize the polarities of our introversion, our extroversion, our curiosity, our wisdom, our gravitas of depth, and our levity of laughter. We need, and our masculine and our feminine. We do that as humans. My father is more feminine today than he was 10 years ago at 87. My mom is more masculine at 86 than she was 10 years ago. They have taken on some of those other polarities. We as a culture need to look at how we have set up the foundation for polarities in politics to not get back to alchemy. And whether that means making third parties, more accessible to a population, to voters, or whether that means having less gerrymandered districts. So someone has to compete in the center in their district more than on the extremes. Most politicians today are more worried about their primary opponent as opposed to their general election opponent, and that just leads to more polarity.
See, I always said you're a lay philosopher, and I love talking with you about these things, and we can go back to them and explore them more, which I'd like to do. But a lot of people want to hear what you have to say about entrepreneurship and business, where you've really made a mark and continue to make a mark. And let's go back historically a little bit to the Phoenix Hotel down on the Tenderloin in San Francisco. That's where you began. And you began really with a project that seemed to many, including you just mentioned your parents, to be foolhardy probably.
Yes.
By their standards. And yet it was a success. It was a success to a greater deal because of your imagination, drawing people like Brenda Lee and a whole host of singers as opposed to prostitutes. It was more of a place for hookers, and it became a place for singers going on tour and so forth. But how much of that is luck? How much of that is just, imagining things? When you go into being an entrepreneur, let's talk about the attitude, because psychology is so important here for you, I know.
Yeah. Well, I think a great entrepreneur is a vulnerable visionary. And that's, I love alliteration. And you got to have the vision and the confidence to try things that maybe haven't been done before. So often what's happening when you're an entrepreneur is you're not replicating what's been done. At the same time, you need to have the vulnerability and the openness and the humility to be a constant learner. And for me, when I started Joie de Vivre, Joy of Life, the boutique hotel company, when I was 26 years old, by buying for almost nothing this broken down pay by the hour motel at Eddy and Larkin in San Francisco, I nobody thought I was going to succeed. I mean, everybody laughed at me, especially my Stanford Business School classmates who 2 years ago knew that I was the youngest guy in the class, and now I was going to be the dumbest guy in the class and the first failure in the class. But I had a deep belief. I had spent some time with Bill Graham when I was, after I graduated from business school in San Francisco. And one of the things, he knew I was a commercial real estate developer. And he said, one of the things that you need to really work on, Chip, is to create a rock and roll hotel in San Francisco. And I said, why? He says, well, there's really not a place for bands and creative people and filmmakers to stay. That most of the hotels in town are either, boring or really, not very well run. And so that's really where the idea of the Phoenix came from for almost 40 years ago. And
you didn't like the name, but it's a good name because Phoenix Myth comes out of the ashes.
Listen, it's San Francisco doesn't have an official city bird, I don't think, but the unofficial city bird is the Phoenix.
Yeah, that's right.
Because of the 1906 earthquake and fire. It was appropriate for that location and that particular property. It needed to rise from its own ashes. That's how I started Joie de Vivre, and we ultimately, over the course of the next 24 years with me as CEO of that company, we created 52 boutique hotels around the state of California and became the second largest boutique hotelier in the U.S. And with that idea of me being both ambitious but also humble at the same time, and trying to have a combination of those two and knowing what is needed at any particular time. When I was going and meeting with investors, I needed to have a certain amount of bravado and ambition. And when I was, working with the housekeepers on the team and all of the line level staff, I needed to have a certain amount of humility. And the great entrepreneurs that I've met have what Jim Collins wrote about in Built to Last as humbition, humility and ambition at the same time.
Well, apropos, here's Frank from Charlotte, North Carolina, and you've partially answered this question. He says, you revolutionized the boutique hotel industry with Joie de Vivre. What was your guiding philosophy when creating unique customer experiences?
Yeah. So I wrote a book called Peak, How Great Companies Get Their Mojo from Maslow. And it was applying, and you and I both know as longtime Esalen.
Hierarchy of needs.
Yeah. So Maslow, there's a Maslow dorm at Esalen named after Abe Maslow, because his hierarchy of needs theory became important. And it was really unusual in that most psychologists in the mid-20th century were focused on the deficit side of humanity, and he was focused on the upside, self-actualization. So I applied that, and it helped me to understand, what do customers need at the hierarchy of needs. And it's not their expectations, it's not their desires, it's their unrecognized needs. The self-actualization experience for a customer in a hotel is to feel like, wow, the hotelier here gave me something I didn't even know I needed. And at the Hotel Vitale in San Francisco, which was one of our hotels, that meant having a yoga class up on the roof or in our yoga studio on the top floor every morning for free. This was over 20 years ago, at a time where, most people didn't think that business leaders wanted to do yoga. Today, we know business leaders do that. But so that was an unrecognized need. Similarly, with the Phoenix, my first hotel, a rock and roll hotel, the unrecognized need was the tour manager who desperately needed a massage, because if you're the tour manager making sure that nobody overdoses or gets, stolen away by groupies, you're stressed out by the time you've done a tour from New York to San Francisco. And so we gave free massages to our tour managers, and they spread the word about us. So the truth is, the unrecognized need is what's at the peak of the customer pyramid. And for those who want to learn more about that, my book, Peak, How Great Companies Get Their Mojo from Maslow, talks more about that.
Well, in Peak, you also talk about terrorists in hotels, or what you call terrorists. How do you be hospitable to these people? I call them a-holes, but, use your own signifier. You want to be hospitable as much as possible, but there are people who make it very difficult and very challenging. Now, you got a kind heart, I know, and a generous spirit, but aside from that, you have to adapt to these kind of people in a mercurial way, almost like a chameleon, don't you?
You do. Yeah. And I would say that the chameleon's not a bad metaphor for this, because I've had a history of having to do that, which means basically you put your own needs and your own point of view aside while trying to be a great listener with someone who may be an a-hole, but to try to win them over. Because quite frankly, most people who are a-holes, most people who are difficult partly in reaction to something. They feel disrespected, etc. Now, some are they just show up and they're an a-hole, and then all they want to do is feel important. So make them feel important, and But if someone is disrespectful to someone on my staff, I will tell you, that's where the line is drawn. Because if you're going to be disrespectful to someone on my staff, I believe, as Herb Kelleher, the founding CEO of Southwest Airlines, taught me, the customer comes second, the employee comes first, and I've always operated that way. And so when someone goes too far with a staff member, I'll throw them out. I'll just say, listen, you're welcome to go to a different hotel. I'll give you a refund. You're not welcome back here. Because you disrespected someone on my staff. Now, it takes me a while to get there. I'm not going to say, just because someone's frowning at a staff member does not going to get you there. But a sexual harassment or any kind of swear words, consistent, like continual swear words, or berating someone, that'll take me there. But I have a pretty long fuse. And partly because I want my team to understand they need to have a long fuse. If you're in the hospitality business and you don't realize that you better think of it as a noble profession and one in which you are going to come second most of the time, then you're in the wrong profession.
But the customer isn't always right by any means. And
no.
Sometimes the people who you feel are on your team and are loyal to you and are very deferential to you and so forth are not necessarily that way to customers. They don't necessarily, in other words, imbue your philosophy, kind of a little bit a-holes themselves, whatever.
Yes.
You're always dealing with that as an entrepreneur, aren't you?
Yeah. And sometimes those people are not the line level people, there are the managers.
Exactly.
And so there was a point in the Joie de Vivre history where I said to all of our leaders and managers in the company, for the next month, we are banning the word leader or manager. Instead of using the word leader or manager, everybody in the company, including the people who work for you, are going to use the word role model. So if we're doing a manager's meeting, we're doing a role model meeting. And for the next month, we're going to actually have role model be the language we'll use. And the reason I did that was because I realized that I had a lot of managers who said, do as I say, not as I do. And so they had a point of view, which was, I'm better than you. And you better do as I say, even if you're coming across as not very joyful. And so for that month, the term role model became the primary term in the company, and it shifted a lot of people. And frankly, for at least 3 managers I can think of during that month, they realized they couldn't be a role model in the way we operate, and that they're better suited to leave the company. And that was an important, better to have them figure that out than have a bunch of line level employees deal with someone who's continually berating them.
Just use the word joyful, and you named your company Joie de Vivre. How important is joy in business? Finding joy, establishing joy?
I love the J.D. Salinger quote, which is, happiness is a solid and joy is a liquid. What that really means to me is happiness is something that's often circumstantial and it's actually substance-based. It's, if you're a happiness junkie as a manager, you're constantly looking for good news. But joy overflows from within you. You say, the joy was overflowing, and that means it's coming from within. It's sort of like a champagne bottle being shaken up, and it's like, woo, that joy is like the bubbles coming out. And that means the joy is not a function of external circumstances. And so you find that joy from within. I'm a big fan of the premise of joy as being an alternative to happiness, because it does suggest that it's based upon intrinsic, not extrinsic motivations. And
It's
I
also
think,
transitory.
yeah. Happiness is transitory.
By nature, it's transitory. Yeah.
Whereas joy can be less circumstantial, and you can be joyful in the worst of circumstances. To me, we live in, we also, let's go back to the Declaration of Independence and say that the U.S. is based upon the pursuit of happiness, which I think is such a fascinating oxymoronic term, because to pursue things means to chase with hostility. So the U.S. is often a place where you have chasing happiness with hostility. You certainly see it at the mall, or used to see it at the mall at Christmas time. But the bottom line is, joy is, to me, and that's why I had some hope for a while there for the presidential election, when we had the little joy, the joy infusion of the Kamala era in the early time when after she was elevated to the role of being the Democratic nominee, because between her and her running mate, I felt like maybe we were seeing that sort of dark side, light side between them and Trump and Vance. But unfortunately, at the end of the day, darkness prevailed.
Here's a question about hotels from Alex in Nevada, who says, I spend a lot of time in hotels all over the world. Many get some things right and many things wrong, like they are paying attention to things I don't need. I don't need anything on the walls or even a TV. I do need an iron, real ironing board, wired internet, not Wi-Fi, proper plugs, coffee machine. How do you approach the process of choosing features?
The best way to do it is to talk to your customers. I loved, back in the day when I was running Joie de Vivre, and I sold the company 14, 15 years ago, but I still own many of the hotels that Joie de Vivre manages. Back then, I loved once a month having a customer dinner. I'd take a few customers out who are staying in some of our hotels at the same time, and maybe 4 or 5 of them with me having a dinner, and I would talk with them about what they'd seen out there in other hotels. What is it that you love about our hotel? What is it you would love to see that we don't currently offer? And by doing that, by spending time with the customers and not relying upon doing a customer survey, which we did, we always had customer surveys, but you learn a lot more in person with a customer.
You're talking face to face.
Yeah, face to face over a dinner. You learn so much more there than you do in a survey. I was able to surmise things like, hey, we should have a yoga studio at the Vitale, or we should offer tour manager massages at the Phoenix, which was not something we did in the early days of the Phoenix. I learned that over time. So yes, spending time with your customers and in person over a friendly conversation, you can learn a lot.
Here's Glenn from Plano, Texas, who says, how do you balance the pursuit of personal fulfillment with societal expectations of success from our childhood on? Do we pay enough attention to health and happiness?
No. I mean, if you, at the end of your life, it's no longer about the resume, it's about the eulogy. And I love David Brooks'
came up in our most recent podcast with Nicholas Kristof. In fact.
Yeah, 2015. He talked about the moral bucket list and said, that we have resume values and eulogy values. In the first half of your life, it's really about the resume. Maybe you shouldn't be, but your LinkedIn profile sort of defines you. And in the second half of your life, you prepare yourself for the fact that there will be a eulogy someday. And what matters there is not people reading your resume in front of everybody else, but instead telling stories and about your happiness and your health and you as a role model. And part of the reason I created MEA was during my time at Airbnb, I had a huge financial windfall from that experience of being the in-house mentor to the three founders and taking that little tech startup with them and making it the world's most valuable hospitality company. And from that financial windfall and from my experience having for 10 years been on the board of Esalen and taught there for a dozen years, I decided I wanted to create the world's first midlife wisdom school dedicated to helping people find their happiness and their health in midlife and beyond, and realize they can get off the treadmill and instead seek joy and seek a legacy, not because of their ego, but because of what Erik Erikson said, the developmental psychologist back in the mid-20th centuries, I am what survives me. And so we as a culture, the U.S. saw a 30-year increase in longevity in the 20th century. In 1900, longevity in the U.S. was 47. By 2000, it was 77. And so that's what created midlife. But as a society, the only thing that we have learned about midlife is that it's a crisis. It's the number one word attached to midlife. And what I've come to see over time, and you alluded to it earlier, is based upon the U-curve of happiness research, social science research, that shows that people's low point in happiness is around 45 to 50, but that in each decade after age 50, people get happier in your 50s than 40s, 60s than 50s, 70s than 60s, and then women in their 80s happier than their 70s. So how do we create a school that helps people to learn how to find that joy and to create a sense of purpose and navigate their transitions, and most importantly, learn how to cultivate and harvest their wisdom and then share it with others?
And so many of those older women are depressed. I mean, the numbers are staggering, especially more in women than in men even.
Well, part of the way, 70, for single people who are over the age of 50s, over 70% of them are women. And so the math is not good. Men die younger and men tend to date younger. And so as a result, you have a lot of older women who, are not, happy about being single at that age, which is part of the reason why at MEA we created a regenerative community. We're not creating retirement communities. We're creating regenerative communities, residential communities dedicated for people later in life who can actually have a communal experience. And so we have 26 homes around a regenerative farm here in Baja, and we'll be creating some regenerative communities in Santa Fe, New Mexico, including rental homes with 5 bedrooms and 5 baths with golden girls, with women who are older, who want to grow older with a collection of other women, wise women, and have the social relationships that are what sustain us as we get older. But let's be clear, loneliness is as toxic as smoking, and Vivek Murthy has shown that.
You talk about the division between ego and soul. First of all, let's see if we can clarify if there really is a soul, if Chip Conley believes there's a soul and what it is. But a lot of this not only brings me back to Erikson and those different phases of life that you alluded to, but also I think of Gail Sheehy. There are different passages, and you talk about, the performative passages being the younger phase of life, and then you're in a later phase which is not so performative. That's the soulful, and that's where you can really find joy. And many people think age is atrophying, age is disintegrating. It's not only loneliness that's often associated with it, but it's, like I said, it's an entropy. A lot of this has to do with mind and attitude, ultimately, doesn't it? And keeping busy in human connections and the things you've touched upon.
Yeah. I have to say that for 7 years now, having MEA open and 6,000 people going through our doors from 60 countries, I've learned an awful lot about how do you shift people's mindset around aging. And as I mentioned earlier, Becca Levy at Yale has shown that when you shift your mindset on aging from a negative to a positive, you gain 7.5 years of additional longevity. Part of it has to do with being curious and having a beginner's mind. For a lot of people around age 50, 50 or 55 or 60, maybe when they're moving out of being in the sandwich generation, maybe their parents have passed away, maybe their kids have left home, they're in a stage in their life where all of a sudden they have some time affluence and they don't know what to do with it, especially if they have a fixed mindset. They only want to play games that they can win. And so part of what we help people at MEA understand is like, hey, what are some things that you might try if you didn't mind how you might look, if you wanted to look a little stupid doing it? So down here in Baja, sometimes that means learning to surf at 60 or 55, or, we had one guy at age 87 learn how to surf. So sometimes it means, learning how to bake bread, which is something we do together, learning how to juggle, learning how to do improv, learning how to sit in a circle with a bunch of other people you don't know and speak not from your facts or your stories of your life, but from that soulful, deep, gut feeling of something that needs to be said that hasn't been said. And so it's a really beautiful experience to get to know a collection of people from the inside out. And that's really what we do at MEA. And so I think the mindset's a piece of it, but part of the mindset that has to shift is having a willingness to be open to learning and being a beginner again.
I should be full disclosure here. I'm on a community board called Vivalon organization, which works with older people, and the activities you talk about are really central to the vision of Vivalon and to providing people with just a different sensibility, as you were suggesting. Our mutual friend Ken Dykewald, who has really made a mark in the world of gerontology and psychology combined, says what's needed most, and this could probably not only apply to the elder phase of life, but just about every phase in a different way, purpose.
Yeah. We as a culture, the U.S., have completely confused being purposeful versus having a purpose. Having a purpose is a noun. It's a possession. And people get a little bit, a little fixated on everybody else has a possession of purpose and I don't, as if it's a BMW in the driveway. The reality is purpose is something that's internal, and it's learning how to live the verb of being purposeful will help you get there. And to me, there are 4 pathways to purpose. It's something that excites you. That's sort of obvious. Something that agitates you. Reed Hastings started Netflix based upon the fact that he was returning some DVDs to Blockbuster Video, and they were charging him $50 or $60 for some videos that were late. And he said, well, that's ridiculous. Why can't I hold them as long as possible? And that's how Netflix came about. So purpose can come from something that excites you, it agitates you, something that makes you curious, or something that is deep inside of you that you've neglected, that you were passionate about when you were younger. There's a woman who came to MEA not long ago, a litigation attorney, and she was 60 years old. She knew that she wanted to work another 10 years for financial reasons, but she didn't want to be a litigation attorney anymore because it was having an effect on her health. I mean, she felt like she was constantly in arguments with people. So she came to MEA and she came to a purpose workshop, a cultivating purpose workshop. And she said to the group the first day, like, I'm going to be a litigation consultant instead. And everybody looked at her like, well, that's like swimming in the same pond. By the end of the week, she realized that she wanted to be a pastry chef. And part of what took her there was that she had dreams she had about her grandmother and the fact that when she was a teenager, she used to cook pies with her grandma. And she loved that. And when she goes traveling internationally, the first thing she looks at on her digital map is where's the closest bakery. And when she has friends over for dinner, she says, you got to stay for dessert. So the bottom line is here's somebody who her whole life had been passionate about baked goods and baking but hadn't seen it as a career path. By the time she was 60, she realized that's what she wanted to do. So she went and took a pastry chef school every Saturday for 3 months and then said, okay, I am junking my legal career, and I am going to buy a bakery in my neighborhood that closed during COVID. All the ovens are there, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to become a bakery entrepreneur. So we see those stories over and over again. But in her case, the purpose was not obvious. It was not the adjacent thing of the litigation consultant that she should be doing.
No, it was the passion. Let's be alliterative again.
That's
You
right.
mentioned the passion, and I always think of Isaac Babel's great line, passion rules the universe. I think maybe we use the multiverses as well, but passion rules our individual universes. We have to find that passion sometimes or stoke it.
We do. And often by midlife, we're feeling a loss of passion. We're feeling our routine of life. And that's another thing we're big on at MEA is ritual versus routine. A routine is something that's habitual, and it's sort of, frankly, over time, it's something you do because you're supposed to do it. But a ritual, according to Malidoma Some, the wonderful African scholar, a ritual is something that you're willing to be altered by. So a routine you're not willing to be altered by, but a ritual you are. And so taking something and turning it into a ritual in your life. I take my shower every morning as a ritual. I do that because I say 3 prayers and 4 mantras in the shower every morning. I stack that habit. It could be a routine, but I see it as a ritual because it's my way of cleansing myself as I go into my day. So how we look at the rituals in our life, recognizing that rituals are, a really important meaning creator in one's life. And so it's a big part of our program at MEA. We literally have a great midlife edit ritual in which people, after 24 hours of being with us, are standing around the fire, throwing into the fire some things that they're ready to edit from their lives based upon some exercises we've done that have gotten them there. Ritual is really important because you ascribe meaning to it.
I believe in ritual, and I think it's very important to make that kind of separation between routine and ritual. And I thank you for that.
Well, and let's recognize, Michael, the Jewish tradition has your bat mitzvah, your bar mitzvah. You have a quinceañera in the Mexican tradition. You have baptism. You have graduation from high school, graduating into and commencement into adulthood. But after having, get married as a ritual and maybe having a baby shower as a ritual, by the time you get to midlife, you have no more rituals or rites of passage. And so introducing rites of passage, and rituals in one's life, in midlife and later is really essential.
Question from Susie in Cleveland. What changes do you foresee in the workplace as society adapts to longer lifespans?
Well, we're going to stay in the workplace longer. And if we're going to stay in the workplace longer, Laura Carstensen at Stanford has created something called the New Map of Life, and I'm on her advisory board. And she suggests, and I think it'd be a great ritual, that maybe around age 45 or 50, everybody realizes that they need to take a sabbatical. Because if you're going to stay in the workplace past age 60 or 65, because it's hard to finance a 30-year retirement with a 40-year career, then maybe around 45 to 50, we need, as a society, to look at the idea of taking a month off, 3 months off, maybe even a gap year. Now, for a lot of people, they can't afford that. So how do you create a funding mechanism similar to what the federal government did with 529 college savings that a parent can do for their kids? How could we create something that would allow you to have a tax-free way of saving money that would apply to taking a gap year around age 50? Because quite frankly, we fuel ourselves up with our high school and college and maybe graduate school education right in our early adulthood. And then we assume that this rental car that we have is going to be, driving the rest of our life. But we're running on fumes around age 50. We need new education. We need new inspiration. We need to be able to go take some time away from our normal routine and habitat to actually imagine something new. Because if you're going to stay in the workplace till you're 75 or maybe 80, you do need a break along the way.
Workplace is changing, though, and certainly the pandemic changed the workplace to a great degree. A lot of people working more from home now. How do you see this all in terms of, how business is evolving and how businesses are going to evolve, or entrepreneurship for that matter, which you've been so central in terms of your own successes, bringing light to. And I'm talking also about maybe the role of AI in all this and how you see it.
Yeah. Well, AI is going to take some jobs along the way. It's also going to enhance some
Already
jobs.
has.
Yeah, it has. You're absolutely right. It has taken jobs. It also will enhance jobs because some of the rote things that you normally do, you can ascribe, give to AI. I think we're moving into an era where I believe that, we've been for, 75 years in the knowledge era in the workplace. The word knowledge, the term knowledge worker, or a knowledge worker came from Peter Drucker in 1959. And knowledge management became a thing in the 1970s and 80s in the corporate world. But all the world's knowledge is on my phone, in my pocket. And with ChatGPT, knowledge is a commodity. So what we really need today is wisdom workers. We need people who know how to get to the essence of something, to the wisdom of something based upon life experience and based upon professional experience. And so one of the things that we do at MEA is teach teams, leadership teams, as well as individuals, to learn how to cultivate their wisdom and how to create a wiser company. So I think we may be moving out of the knowledge worker era into the wisdom worker era, and out of knowledge management into wisdom management. Human wisdom can be the balance to artificial intelligence. Now, there will come a time in the future where maybe with generative AI, there will be, wiser machines. But the truth is that the life experience that we get from, I don't want a robot at my bedside, talking with me when I'm about to die. I want a human. I want someone who has empathy, who has intuition, who has the ability to understand who I am. What we're getting from AI currently is a bad version of that. Will only get better over time, but I still believe that humans have the capacity to be human much better than any machine ever can do.
So where does leadership and mentorship fit into all this as you see things?
Well, mentorship goes in both directions today. I mean, when one of the things I learned at Airbnb was like, wow, yeah, I was the oldest person there. I was twice the age of the average person. And I had a lot of wisdom to offer. But the truth is I had wisdom to learn from the young people too. I learned a lot of DQ, digital intelligence, from the young people, and they learned a lot of EQ, emotional intelligence, from me. And we were both better off for it. So intergenerational collaboration should happen like never before. And by the year 2027, the majority of Americans are going to have a younger boss. So this wisdom era we're going into is a wisdom that's meant to be across the board, not just older people, having more power over younger people. That era is over. The era of intergenerational collaboration is here. So leadership better have, and then when it comes to leadership, especially with remote teams, the more possessed we are by digital, whether that's through Zoom or that's through how we do our work, the more the human side of things is the scarce commodity that actually needs to be valued. And what I think is very encouraging is that companies across the globe are amplifying their need for emotional intelligence in their leaders, more so today than 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And that's partly because what they're seeing is that that's the scarce commodity in leadership that's needed in a time where we're overly reliant on the linear thinking of AI.
Hard to measure emotional intelligence, though, isn't it? You're talking about empathy and intuitiveness and those kinds of things. Quantifying them is challenging.
The easiest way to measure it is a 360, review anonymously of the people who work with the person. One of my favorite tools I've used with leaders in my company is, I say, like someone who thinks they have a great EQ, but they don't. Like, what are the 5 adjectives you want people to use to describe you? Okay, let's come up with what those 5 are. I want to be encouraging. I want to be curious. I want to be this or that. Well, then, okay, give me those 5. Now, without you knowing, we are going to go do a 360 on you and ask the people who work with you, what are the 5 adjectives they would use to describe you on a good day and a bad day? And let's see if there's a congruence there. And often there's not. And then I sit down with that leader and I say, okay, one of the 5 words that you said you wanted showed up. 4 of them didn't show up. What are we going to do to create some habits that are actually going to help you to be more encouraging? And so yes, you're right. EQ is hard to measure, but it's easy to see. Justice Potter quote about pornography, I know it when I see it. Emotional intelligence is the same. I know it when I see it.
Where does love fit into all this? I know that sounds like a kind of
what's love got to do with it, Michael?
Yeah, I think of some other music lyrics that fall into that too. But what does love have to do with it? When people seek wisdom, they're often seeking a greater understanding of love or peace, serenity, those kinds of things.
Love is the ultimate religion of the world, if we are willing to see it. And it is universal, and it is timeless. And it is, frankly, what's most important to people at their deathbed. And probably Frank Ostaseski, who started the San Francisco Zen Center, and he taught me long ago, Chip, the thing that people say on their deathbed is, was I well loved and did I love well? And so at the end of the day, love is this currency. And it's a currency in both ways. It's a currency in terms of something that is valuable to us as we age, but it's also the current. It's the current, like the electrical current that connects us. And learning how people can develop their capacity to love is something that I think is a real skill that we have to learn as we are adulting ourselves and becoming more human as we get older.
Kind of things you're talking about that we're talking about now, humanity and extending one's humanity and also emotional intelligence, seem to me to be instrumental in many ways, or ought to be, to success tied to the kind of work you did, that is hospitality.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, what was it Maya Angelou said? I don't care. You won't remember what a person said to you or did to you, but you'll remember what they made you feel. And hospitality is all about how you made you feel. And the art of hospitality as opposed to the science at the end of the day is what matters most. Yes, the science will help you create a great service culture, but the art of hospitality is what will help people feel like they were loved and cared for in the process. So yeah, and they felt joyful. And so
ritual is an important part of that as well, certainly.
Sure,
isn't it?
Yeah, it is. That how does a person feel? And and these moments of truth. When a person is trying to decide whether they made the right decision of where they're staying, whether that's in a hotel or an Airbnb or whether it's coming to MEA. There are moments of truth and some rituals that you need to have during those moments of truth that remind people, I made the right decision.
Remember when we were in conversation once about Airbnb, and I was interested in finding out what your thoughts were about some of those kind of nightmarish stories about people who went to a place and found out it wasn't exactly what they anticipated, expected, hoped for, whatever, or things just didn't go their way and so forth. What especially are the big lessons for you? I mean, you were mentoring the head of Airbnb, the big lessons that really crystallize in your mind?
Well, the most important thing I learned in 7.5 years of work at Airbnb, 4 of those years full-time, is that the Airbnb hosts around the world are like mini entrepreneurs. And the key thing for them to understand is, how do you have the data to know how well you're doing? And how do you do a better job? And so part of my job in the company, and with Brian as the CEO, was to help use data to educate our hosts around the world about how to do a constantly better job. And, the beautiful thing about Airbnb relative to the hotel industry is, generally speaking, guests in a hotel don't fill out, an online survey about their experience. They go to TripAdvisor, which, Marriott doesn't own TripAdvisor. So Whereas at Airbnb, 75% of the hosts and guests review each other. So we are getting constant data, or Airbnb is getting constant data about how a host is doing. And then we can package that data and give suggestions to the host about what they can do differently and how they can do a better job. I created these things called the Airbnb Open, these festivals of hospitality all around the world that had ultimately in our last one, 20,000 people from 110 countries who came to it so they could learn how to be more hospitable. And so the thing that's interesting is when I joined Airbnb, the average guest satisfaction relative to hotels was not very good. When I left Airbnb 7.5 years later, our guest satisfaction was far higher than the hotel industry. And that was partly because we had the data to be able to give to our hosts suggestions about how they could do a better job and become hopefully a super host, which is a program that I elevated and really made aspirational for our hosts.
What does it mean to be a super host?
It means there are 5 different metrics that we measure that help you to become a super host. But in basic layman's terms, it's somebody who's a spectacular host with a great listing, and therefore you get a badge that says you're a super host, and you get better placement on the Airbnb website. So it's a way to incentivize a host to do a great job.
A question from Jeff in Miami Beach, and I know you wrote something called karmic capitalism. He wants to know, is karma a factor?
Karma is a factor, but the problem with karma in the world we live in today is it takes a long time. So, with Trump becoming president again, if you believe that karma is what goes around comes around, you sort of wonder, when's it going to come around for Trump? And you sort of thought it was happening with some of the lawsuits, but my God, that wily cat got out of those lawsuits. And so karma to me speaks to the idea that you are going to take with you to your next lifetime your lessons and the consciousness that you have developed in this lifetime. And the beauty of that is, and this gets back to the soul question, this soul that is incarnate, that actually has this imprint of your wisdom and your consciousness from this lifetime, that's the karma that you take to the next lifetime. And, we have yet to have any kind of karmic meter that can sort of tell you, coming into this lifetime, here's your karma. Maybe in the future we'll have something like that. But for me, it's a belief system. It's a ritual that helps me to realize that when it comes to capitalism, being a karmic capitalist means what goes around comes around. If you treat people well, especially your employees first and your customers second, in the end, your investors will be well received because the business will do well.
Don't you have to believe in an afterlife? I mean, karma comes from the Hindus, and they believe not only in afterlife, they believe in reincarnation.
Yeah,
different souls.
And that's why I'm saying your soul incarnates, and that there is an afterlife. And I believe in afterlife. I believe in regeneration. I literally just got back from India. I spend a lot of time there. So yes, that's my belief system.
What do you tell those of us who don't have those beliefs? I wrote a book on agnosticism. I was trying to find what I could have faith in. It's called Spiritual Envy. I don't even know if it's still in print, but I was trying to grapple with these big ideas like we're doing a bit here. And the real question is, it's like people who join Alcoholics Anonymous and they don't believe in a higher power. What do they do?
Well, in Alcoholics Anonymous, we say, good orderly direction, as GOD is good orderly direction. And you believe in the power of the 12 steps or the power of a community or a group. You have faith in electricity. You may not have faith in a higher power, but you have faith in certain things in life that they serve you, and you have some belief system that those things are going to be there for you. I believe. I'm not going to speak for you, Michael. Is that true?
This is a matter of faith in some ways. I mean, I believe in doing good, for example, but I'm not certain that it's going to result in a reward in an afterlife or a punishment if I don't do good or that sort of thing. It's just something that I believe in.
Well, so another form of afterlife is reputation. So if you do good in this lifetime, you pass away. Let's say there's no life for you in the future, but there is a reputational life that lives on after you've passed, Michael. And so that reputational future is the karma.
Is
you
that
know,
legacy then? Is that what you would call a legacy?
Yeah, I have caution with legacy because people have a big capital L legacy, which is, your name on a university building or something like that. Small legacy is like what they say at a eulogy, in your eulogy. So to my mind, yes, if you're using the small L legacy, then I'm fine with that. But at the end of the day, it's like in the movie Coco. Remember the movie Coco with Pixar, famous movie where, the people who actually no longer exist in the future are not the ones. I mean, everybody dies, but the ones who no longer exist are the ones who are no longer in someone's memory. And so that is the curse. The curse is to have not had an imprint, positively or negatively, quite frankly, that you have made the imprint to be in someone's memory moving on. And then you fade into oblivion. And so, yes, as an agnostic or an atheist, you could have a point of view, which is I live on in other people's memories and in the role model that I have been in this lifetime, such that there's a 7-generation benefit out there in the future.
Unto the 7th generation. That's right out of the Old Testament.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, let me first of all thank all of you who joined us for this episode of Gray Matter with Michael Krasny on Apple, Spotify, and on our website at graymatter.show. And if you haven't yet become a member of the podcast, I invite you to join by going to the website at graymatter.show, where you can find previous episodes, and that's Gray with an E. Also invite you to mail any reactions or suggestions you might have to me at mkrasny@graymatter.show. My thanks to the Gray Matter with Michael Krasny team, Alex, Shannon, Chad, Kevin, Jeff, Colleen, Tanya, and Lori, and a special thanks to this week's guest. And I want to thank him personally and thank him for his time, and always a joy to be with him, Chip Conley. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael.
I'm Michael Krasny.
Bandwidth for Gray Matter is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com.